Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Coaching Uncovered podcast, a podcast where coaches come to talk about coaching. And I thought it was about time we got an Australian in speech marks, because he's not technically an Australian, but we claim him as one. We've got Richard Woodhouse on the podcast today. So thanks for coming in and having a chat with me. Richard, tell everyone about yourself.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me, Brent. Well, as you alluded to, I grew up in New Zealand, a beautiful place called Nelson, top of the South Island, where I played all of my junior golf. Just a really good all-inclusive golf club that really promoted junior golf back when I was young, and I played all of my golf through there and coached by some great coaches while I was a junior golfer, and then conducted my traineeship under the guidance of Ken Allen at Nelson Golf Club in 2000 and 2002, until 2005, and then stayed on there for another couple of years before, I guess, what I felt like I needed to take the next step in my career and branch out, and so I decided to pack up and move to the Gold Coast, and with really just a passion of learning and wanting to take my coaching further. I guess, like every other young professional, I wanted to play a lot, so played a lot of pro-ams through the early part of my traineeship and when I finished, but very quickly decided that coaching was definitely my pathway and where my passion was, and moved over to here to the Gold Coast in 2007, and basically traveled around for 6 months just watching other coaches coach, coaches who I'd come across, and I was fortunate enough to get offered a full-time teaching position at Royal Pines, which with Mark Gibson, which was a fantastic start for me over here on the Gold Coast. I stayed there through till 2012, and then got approached by the owners of KDV Sport, the parent company who we're with right now, to come on board and set up a golf academy. They purchased an existing driving range, and had the vision of building something very special and building a full-time golf academy structure. And so 2012 till present, that's where I am right now. So it's been a bit of a journey the last 10, 12 years living over here, but we have the golf academy now into a very, very good place. And in conjunction with that, I also work with Golf Australia in the Queensland division, working with their high performance program through the Queensland Academy of Sport, and obviously the tour player aspect as well.
No, that's cool. There's heaps of questions that we'll get to when it comes to that. But probably the first one I want to talk about is, and it's quite a common thing, and I've obviously went through something similar. Everyone turns professional, in my opinion, to be a player. We all have dreams of being superstars. We all have dreams of being out there on the tour. How did you come to the realization that you weren't going to be a tour player? Was it just the fact that you couldn't shoot the scores that the guys were shooting out there, or how did you come to that realization?
Yeah, I don't know if it was so much the scoring aspect. I mean, I grew up with a lot of great players. There was definitely a good friend of mine back home who was he was probably the first one. The town I grew up in wasn't very big. It was only 100,000 people or so. So the exposure, I guess, to players playing on the tour was a lot less than, for example, living over here. But I guess from my point of view, I got into coaching early in my traineeship, where my mentor and my boss, I guess at the time, allowed me to, start coaching, start attending seminars. I came over to all the PGA of Australia coaching seminars right from year one of my traineeship, and I just found a love for learning, and in terms of especially the biomechanics side, the health and fitness side, how we tie in human movement into the science of human movement into the golf swing, and then also I guess the holistic approach of development of an athlete rather than just development of a golf swing as well. So I don't know really what flicked the switch. I'd say it would probably be from attending the seminars and looking up to people like Chuck Cook or Ledbetter back when we were younger. They were probably the couple of the famous coaches, so to speak, that I really looked up to. But yeah, to this day, I still love playing, still love getting out there. I don't get out there near as much as what I'd like to, just due to my schedule. But coaching just took over early. It was very organic. It wasn't forced. It wasn't a conscious decision at the time. But it just evolved.
So how much of an impact do you think playing has on coaching ability? This is something that I'm probably going to go down with my research path, is how much of an impact playing ability have. How close to the standard you're coaching do you think you have to be able to coach those type of players?
Yeah, look, I think you have to be able to relate. Okay, so definitely playing standard for me is really important. Being able to, if I want to be able to demonstrate a certain golf shot, I need to be able to do that with competency. So definitely, I feel like it's very important. I know there's a lot of wonderful coaches out there that would probably say the opposite, that they don't think it's overly important. I personally find it easier to relate to players and understand what they're going through having a bit of a playing background, and from my own point of view, still trying to refine my own skill. It allows you to relate, allows you to understand a little bit more what they're going through from a learning point of view, and also from a performance point of view on the golf course.
So, question without notice: how close do you have to be? So, if you're coaching a tour player that's out on the US tour, it's obviously a pinnacle of most tour players' careers. How close to that standard do you have to have been to be able to coach those type of players?
Well, I don't think being close to that standard. I mean, I'm not close to that standard. I mean, it's for a number of reasons. I think being close to that standard to play on the PGA Tour is so much more than, as I mentioned, being able just to hit the golf shot. So you have to be a very, very special individual to be able to deal with all of the external factors that go on there. But so I wouldn't say you have to be close to that standard, but you have to have a realization of what they're going to be going through in that environment to perform at their best ability.
Yeah, and I would tend to agree with that. So obviously you don't have to be exactly to that standard, but you've got to have that understanding of what it's like to play those shots under pressure, or to deal with those sweaty palms and hands shaking, playing different shots at different times. So.
Absolutely, and I think attending golf tournaments, watching the players play, traveling with them to certain events, that's where I learn a lot about what they go through as well. So it's all good and well seeing them at the academy and watching them on the range, or in the lab or in the studio, but actually watching them on the golf course and working with them pre and post round, that's where you get a good feel for where as a coach you can make the difference to their particular week, regardless of what's going on.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's really good. So talking about your venue, because you've obviously got, or if people aren't aware, you've got a really amazing setup there. Mm-hmm. We bring the trainees there occasionally with training schools and things like that, and to give. I'm sure you get plenty of PGA professionals dropping in there to check the venue out. So talk about how that came about. How did you get into that, and how did you come to the conclusion that you had to have that type of stuff set up in your coaching facility?
Yeah, well, it was, I guess, as I mentioned earlier, when I was at Royal Pines, I was there for 5 years, and a client of mine who I was coaching at the time got approached by the owner of the current facility that I'm at right now, and they had the vision of setting up a golf and tennis academy, and the piece of land that they wanted to acquire was already had an existing range on it, and an old 9-hole golf course, and an old pro shop, and it took approximately 5 years to go through all of the approvals and so forth for this new facility to be built. So they basically just tore everything down, restarted again, built an amazing facility. So we have a 40-bay undercover range, full performance gymnasium, recovery with swimming pool, saunas, etc. And then we have the golf academy area, which is we've got 4 indoor studios fitted out with some of the best technology available to players. So I assisted them with designing and implementing how it would look and how it would run, and the vision of what we want to set up in respects to having it work with the public range, with also the I guess the private sector of the golf academy side of things, and then with the bigger vision of growing our junior academy to a world-class junior academy, which is definitely a huge part of what we do now.
And we'll certainly get to that junior academy. But I'm interested in, if you had the time over again to build the academy, to build the venue, would you change anything? I know people have this idea of what they should want in an academy, and is there something that you would change? Anything that you would do differently?
You know what? I think that we've done a pretty good job of it. I think that we wanted to make it inviting, yet we wanted to make it feel very, I guess, special when the players come in too, in the sense whereby it's quite private. A lot of the time, people, don't want to. They want to get on with their business without anybody else watching them train. The technology that we use is, in my opinion, some of the best going around. So we use the likes of, obviously, TrackMan and Gasp and Science in Motion, Hack Motion, K-Vest, etc. We've got a good short game facility that's obviously still taking time to grow in. But I guess, like any facility, like that's being built, I guess we're landlocked a little bit. So, I mean, size, if you had your perfect world, you just have it bigger, right? But look, I think it's absolutely world class where we are, and the feedback we have from the players and people who visit the facility, whether it be PGA members or general public or players, is always very, very positive.
Yeah, that's cool. You said you got a heap of tech there, which is obviously really, really good for coaching and helpful for you as a coach. How do you, from a coaching perspective, how do you go about determining what type of tech you use for different players that come onto your teaching tee?
Yeah, sure. So, I guess everything, well, for the most part, I always have a bit of a theory of, we measure, we don't guess, right? So, my goal is that when I'm coaching a player, is I give them ownership of what the outcome is. So for them to have ownership of the outcome, they need to understand a few things of cause and effect in terms of what's making the golf ball do what it does when it flies through the air. So using the technology, whether it be through TrackMan, whether through the ball flight and club radar, or biomechanics through Hack Motion or K-Vest, the advantage of the technology is for the player to understand what they're doing more. So 2D video, just watching it playback, can be quite deceiving. No two people are the same. Everyone moves differently for a multitude of reasons. So being able to factually show the player, okay, the ball moved right to left in the air because of these reasons at collision, and then reverse engineer it back and go, okay, the body or the hands or whatever was going on influenced that. Then when they leave the lesson tee and they go and do their own practice, they have the ability to self-coach. They have the ability to identify for themselves and ultimately become less reliable on a coach, which is definitely my objective, especially when players are heading off to tournaments. You're not going to be there with them 24/7. So I guess technology really, really assists in the understanding aspect and accelerates the understanding.
Yeah, we certainly have that comment come up quite a bit. It came up in Jason Hellman's episode about he likes to coach himself out of a job, basically. So the idea is for the players to have a greater understanding of what they do and why they do it, and then they can tend to self-coach a little bit.
Yeah, that's right. The more the player understands, the easier it is. But it all just boils down to communication. So essentially, technology is just another communication tool, whereby it just gets the player and coach on the same page. We start speaking the same. I always describe we start speaking the same language. So it becomes less, I guess, subjective. We can understand it a little bit better together, and the communications just become seamless.
Yeah, well, that's obviously extremely important, being able to get the information across to the student. You can't you can have all the information that you want if you can't get it across to the guys the guy in front of you. You haven't got a chance.
That's right.
Of them being able to apply it. But it kind of leads to a two-part question now. So obviously, with all that technology, that would attract a certain type of golfer to your facility. Have you ever had a situation where you have refused to use the tech with a certain player just based on who they are in front of you?
Oh, look, daily. Yeah, absolutely. It depends on how long you've been working with the player and the relationship you have with them. But I mean, the technology's there, but again, as I said, it's just a measurement tool and it's just a communication tool. So sometimes, there's many sessions whereby there's minimal discussion on what the technology says. Sometimes it is, if I've got a long-term relationship with the student, they're already going to be understanding certain things, and it's, it might just be drill acquisition or whatever it may be. But if a player comes in and they're apprehensive, or they think it's what you often terminology you often hear is it's too technical. Okay, well, that's basically, in my opinion, that just means you just don't understand it yet. So just trying to build that understanding with those players, and you build again, just build relationships, build trust with the players that we're using the technology to accelerate the learning. And the technology, again, is it's just feedback. It's, at the end of the day, TrackMan might tell you your path's 3 left and your face is 2 open, but it's on me to help the player adapt any form of change or movement pattern adjustment. So the technology is just an answer. It's not the solution.
Yeah. So has there been players where you've forced them to use, say, KVS, for example, because you thought that it would help them, but they weren't keen to use that type of technology?
Very rarely. I wouldn't say I ever really forced them to use it. I would say, yeah, that's right. I mean, I think, the reason I'm using it is to make them better. So I haven't had really any pushback, to be honest. Very, very rarely. You hear some players go, like it feels, they might initially complain because, like you got some sensors strapped onto their body, for example, and they might feel a little bit foreign for the first 5 minutes, but 5 minutes in, they don't even know they're wearing it, and you're capturing some good data, good clean data, and by the few minutes or periodically into the session, they're loving the feedback, and especially the biofeedback tool through KVest or Hack Motion is unreal. But yeah, the initial pushback would only ever be because they're probably unaware of basically what feedback they're going to get from it.
Yeah, for sure. I would generally I found that people were too interested in the data, and I've found myself turning off screen so they can't see the data every swing.
Absolutely. I mean, I'll look at the graphs and understand what's going on with it, but I won't be showing the players that for the most part, unless they want to see it, unless they want to understand it. If you're going to show them any form of, I guess, visual feedback with that sort of data, you're often showing avatars or where they're getting a bit more of a holistic look at how the body's moving, where I might be looking more closely at a graph of how much side bend the pelvis is moving into with rotation, but they don't need to see that.
So obviously you've got all that information at your fingertips. Do you bring any external service providers into your teaching facility there? Yeah,
absolutely. So we use we've got some physios. So I mainly use the Golf Australia service providers. So through the Queensland Academy of Sport, we basically use Josh Meyer from a physiotherapy point of view, and Ryan Lumsden does the advanced 3D analysis with all of the players. Jonah Oliver looks after sports psych. So yeah, we've got service providers all the time. We've got our own strength and conditioning coach who looks after all of our academy players, Ashley Nisbet. She's located here as well. So yeah, it's definitely a team approach, with the player being at the center of that. So yeah, we all have a role to play in understanding how we can get that player to develop.
Now, there's some pretty good names being dropped there. So anyone out there keen to check out those names, certainly some people worthwhile having a Google on and finding out what they do, because there's some pretty good operators in that list there. So if people don't know you at all, I'll give them a bit of a visual. You're built like a brick wall. How tall are you? 6 foot?
6'4".
6'4", and pure strength. So if you haven't seen Richard, Google him, because it's an intimidating sight. And if I was being coached by him, I'd certainly be doing what he told me to do, because it's he's a scary looking man. So
Wow.
that's so obviously fitness plays a huge role in your life.
Yeah, it does.
How do you bring that into your golf coaching?
Yeah, I mean, fitness for me is these days it's just a lifestyle factor. So I've always been involved in sport since forever, whether it be through basketball, soccer, golf, tennis, cricket, the whole lot. So I've been in in the athlete world for forever. How do I bring it into golf? I'm a firm believer that if you understand how to look after your body, how the body should move effectively and efficiently, you're going to be able to perform at a higher level, whether that be through your physical attributes, but also mentally how you feel about yourself too. Playing a 72-hole golf tournament, 6 weeks on the trot with practice rounds, pro-ams inclusive. If you're fit, you're healthy, your mind's working well, you're going to perform better in the long run. So yeah, it does play a huge role in my coaching, and I try to lead by example for the players I work with. There's no point in me telling them to get up early and go and train and eat well if I can't do it myself. So sort of they drive me to be a better athlete, and vice versa.
So that's great for that tour player, because you have a full stable of those high performance players. Mm-hmm. How do you bring that type of training into your average club golfer that turns up for some coaching?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, the average player who turns up for some coaching typically will run a physical assessment on the player, movement screen, through TPI protocol, basically. So they're through the Titleist Performance Institute. So just assessing their dynamic movement through posture, balance, mobility, stability. Whether I do that through my knowledge through the TPI, or I'll often refer the player if I notice there's definitely an area that needs improvement. I'll bring Ashley in to the fold, and often the player will then work with Ashley and myself on those skills to improve their performance. So it's an assessment first, get them to understand how that might be affecting their movement patterns, and then bring in our strength and conditioning coach to work with that club golfer.
So do you find that people are much more open to that type of coaching these days? Do you 100%. Find that's been a changing field? I've found certainly early on in my coaching career that people were thinking they would go to the clubhouse to get warmed up for golf, so to speak, as opposed to heading to the range. But I certainly think it's changing, and hopefully players are much more open to that type of training.
Yeah, there's no question at all. There's whether it be senior golfers or junior athletes, I think the knowledge and the science is out there now, and it's definitely become more commonplace that players are understanding that it's just really, really important to achieve what they want. It's not for everyone. Not everyone's going to want to do it, but even we'll dial it all the way back to them just being able to do some drills at home, whether it be in their lounge room or at the golf course before they play, just to really assist with their patterns and really tie into them and getting them to understand that it's all just beneficial for their golf swing, making their golf easier, and ultimately for the general club golfer, creating more longevity in the game for that player as well. So just keeping players playing for a longer period of time, versus having to give the game up through lack of power or lack of mobility, I think is a really important step to take for all coaches out there to help players with that.
So, I would tend to think having a basic understanding as a coach yourself, so doing TPI training or that kind of thing to get a basic understanding, but having that external service provider where you can refer people off to scale down the training for certain players. They've obviously got the expertise in that area, so having that connection with someone outside of the coaching realm can certainly help with you in that space.
Yeah, no question at all. Yeah, the team approach is critical. It can't just be all on just the golf coach. So, yeah, it's definitely the better service providers you can get working with it within your academy or your team is very important.
It's becoming so common these days, and all the high level coaches I'm seeing out there just have got that team set up, and it can work both ways. Obviously, you're pushing clients towards them, and if they're working on someone from a physical perspective that plays golf, they'll push them towards you. So it can work both ways, and from a business perspective as well, which is obviously extremely important as well.
Yeah, that's it. And at the end of the day, the player just really appreciates it. They appreciate the fact that we care about them, and we've just ultimately just got their best interests at heart. So I think it all just naturally evolves to, it's good for business, but it's also it's what the player wants.
And from a purely cynical perspective, you're covering your backside as well. If someone's injured or carrying something that you don't know about, and you try and make them do a swing change that they physically can't do, you can get yourself open for all sorts of legal issues.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. You have to have the care of the player first and foremost.
No, extremely important. So, looking through your bio when I was doing some research for this podcast, there's a heap of high level players on your coaching roster, which is great. But I'm hoping there's some coaches out there that don't have the advantage of coaching those kind of players. What is similar and what is different about coaching tour players to coaching the average players? What type of things do you do differently with those different standards of golfers?
Yeah, well, I guess when you're coaching tour players, their skill level's already obviously incredibly high. So, so the major difference, I guess, working with a tour player versus a newer golfer or a club golfer is developing that skill acquisition with the club golfer. So, your main job with a tour player is just not to stuff them up, So it's to find ways of making them better, and sort of as we mentioned before, getting them to possibly understand when they play well, why do they play well, and when they play poorly or where their misses are, getting them to understand that with a little more detail. So I guess you call it the 1%ers. So just trying to find those key performance factors with those tour players, and a lot of the work you do with them is process based, is performance based in respects to how they're dealing with their weeks, how they're working through their practice schedules, etc. So in respects to the club golfer, there's probably more time spent on their movement patterns, getting them to move efficiently and effectively, but again, still coaching them in a way whereby they still have that ownership of understanding. So I guess you're heavier in the area of skill acquisition with the club golfer. With the tour player, definitely more taking their current skill level, refining it, working out ways in which they can score better, and moving forward from there.
No, that makes a heap of sense. And now I'm interested in this question because I know I came across this when I first started working with high performance players overseas. All of a sudden, I had 20 kids in front of me that could do exactly the stuff that I was telling them to do, and I worked out pretty quickly that the stuff that I was coaching was not correct, because they were applying it perfectly and they weren't getting the ball flight that they were after. So has your coaching changed over the years with regards to, so as you've been exposed to high level players or exposed to more 3D information or TrackMan, how has your coaching evolved over time?
I think it's constantly evolving in respects to, I'm always trying to seek new information or learn more about, whether it be biomechanics, whether it be how people learn, how to communicate better. More and more now, I guess, understanding what influence, when it comes to, I guess, from a swing point of view, what are the players reacting to in respects to managing club face, managing impact, their release patterns. So, and then the matchups in the golf swing. So if a player moves the club in X movement, how are they then going to be reacting to either compensate against that or to make it effective? So I guess from my point of view, learning more and more and more about the biomechanics is very, very important. but then also the communication side. So building in more training sessions whereby I'm getting the players competing against themselves or competing against others, creating environments where that skill has to be put under more pressure, has to be transferred at a faster rate, so that they can deal with those environments or the environmental factors they're faced with on the golf course. So an example of that would be, I guess, in the early days of coaching, everything was just a one-on-one session. These days now, definitely I use the one-on-one sessions to build that deep knowledge of what they're doing, but then we run a lot of squad sessions whereby I get those players together, get them competing against one another. I get them transferring the skills in a training environment, so that then the expectations from their point of view are aligned to what they're probably going to face on the golf course. So, yeah, I guess the biggest change would probably be the structure of the lessons that I'm delivering these days.
And I certainly think being exposed to more performance type coaches as golf coaches these days, we certainly are moving down more towards that space where I think 20 years ago we were very much technically based coaches. We were all about what the golf swing was and how it looked and how perfect it could be. But getting the ball in the hole is certainly an important skill, and that performance based coaching. So shout out to all those performance coaches out there. I'll be hitting them up to come and talk on the podcast as well at some stage.
Absolutely.
Okay, so you do a heap of presenting. Mm-hmm. So the PGA Academy use you in the trainee program a lot. You've also presented a lot to our full PGA professionals. Mm-hmm. So how do you find that, and how did you get into that, and what benefit do you get out of doing that?
Yeah, I mean, I love presenting at seminars. It gives me, I think sometimes they're the opportunities where I actually learn the most. It gives me an opportunity to prepare what I want to present to the people who are listening. So it gives me an opportunity to reflect on what my current knowledge level is at, but I also get the opportunity to get some brilliant questions asked toward me as well. So I find it's definitely good for my own personal development. It's one of those things whereby, I guess in my younger years, like getting up in front of a few hundred people and talking was incredibly daunting. So I guess from a personal development point of view, to now be able to be comfortable and standing in front of a lot of people and presenting has been brilliant for my own personal development, and it's just something else that gets me out of my normal comfort zone, which is definitely what I'm about. I'm, whether it be me from my own personal point of view or working with players, I'm a big fan of trying to get people to become comfortable in uncomfortable environments. So when we go away and play golf tournaments, or whether it be at club level or at tour level, ultimately tournament environments can be very uncomfortable places through the stresses that the players put on themselves or just different venues they're playing at. So again, presenting for me is an opportunity to put myself in an uncomfortable position. So, but it's where I feel like a lot of my learning is done, and I'm constantly reading or listening or to podcasts or speaking with other coaches around the world, just to keep learning more information, because I think there's so much out there. So yeah, we can never really stop learning.
That's it. Have you found that having to present to people clarifies your ideas on certain topics, being able to sit down and go through and put it down on paper?
100%. That's what I was trying to say. Yeah. So it gives me an opportunity to reflect on where I'm at the moment, with our schedules where we've always got so much on, sometimes it's nice just to sit down and prepare a presentation and strategically look at what we're talking about, and yeah, definitely it helps with my own coaching, it helps assess where we're currently at with our current knowledge.
So tied into that, you obviously publish a heap of articles out there in different publications around Australia. Is that something that they approached you to do, or did you go to them first, or how did that come about?
No, they approached me to do that. So whether it be magazine articles or online publications or webinars, whatever it may be, typically they're approached. I get approached to do those. In the early, I have no problem with throwing myself in front of a camera and putting some information out there. I'm definitely not of the opinion whereby my information is just solely my information and you have to pay for it to come and get it. I'd rather throw some information out there where it helps players play better. The more people are playing good golf and enjoying golf, the better the game is. So I enjoy giving some information out, and a lot of the time that then works in a roundabout way whereby people contact me to get further information, and it's good from a business point of view, but it's also it's something that I really enjoy doing.
I think I encourage a heap of coaches to start putting their stuff out there, even if they haven't got the profile yet, to be approached by these organisations to put it out there in the public realm. You can do it yourself. Get your YouTube channel started, get your social media platforms going, start putting yourself out there, and that can lead to other things down the track. So certainly important thing for coaches to do.
It gives you the opportunity to create some really great relationships too. I mean, some of the I'd classify them as good friends of mine now. I've met initially through social media. I mean, going forward, we've met up at certain seminars or tournaments or workshops, but some of the initial meeting points you get with people now are through social media, and the golf world is pretty tightly connected. So putting more information out and sharing information amongst coaches is I can only see as a beneficial thing.
I completely agree, and as I said before, my this podcast came about through my connections through social media, and it's so easy to find people. When you go back through the episode with Mike Fay, we've done a heap of work with Mike, or I have, online through different things. We do a podcast together and we do blog posts, but we haven't ever been in the same room together.
Yes, it's like that, right? So, yeah.
Only ever spoken online. So you spoke earlier about your junior academy.
Yeah.
Now, it's a pretty awesome setup up there. So tell people about what that is and how that came about.
Yeah, so one of my visions was I felt like the junior space I felt like it hadn't been set up overly well from a private sector perspective, I guess. When I first came on board with KTV Sport. So our vision was to set up a world-class junior academy. So we basically built it off the TPI model in respect to the different phases of development. So we offer phases of development from juniors from 4 years old through to 18 years old. I have 3 wonderful coaches who basically work inside of that academy as well. So Lockie Ritson, Jai McBride, and Ash Nisbet, our S&C coach, are all involved.
You're scraping the bottom with Jai, aren't you? No,
he'll be listening to this. You know that, yeah. So he's wonderful. So between the 4 of us, we look after the junior academy. I predominantly am involved in the high performance space of the junior academy, but essentially, even though it's called high performance, it's still just development at that age. They're just slightly higher skilled golfers. So they do physical development, golf swing development, skill acquisition, the whole lot, all the way from that fundamental phase at 4 years old through the play phase, train phase, and then into the high performance. So the workload just progressively gets higher. We've got approximately 120 players, 120 juniors in our academy at the moment that are attending full-time coaching down here after school. So I think 3 years ago we had 15 juniors in the academy. So we've pretty much got it to capacity right now in respect to our current coaching staff, but we've got still plenty of room to grow. We've got plenty of a big vision as to where it's going to head. So, and the results of the players and the feedback from the parents speaks for itself. So we're getting some wonderful tournament results, and just generally helping these kids develop as great kids, more so than just good golfers as well.
Which is great. And that certainly leads to the next question. So statistics show that a very small percentage of these kids are going to be high-level players.
Yep.
So how do you deal with the parents' expectations of these kids going to be superstars as opposed to just being good people?
Absolutely. Well, we do it twofold. So we've got we run a parent information seminar every term, at the start of every term, outlining our program, outlining our core values and beliefs that we have at the academy. We show player pathways as to what pathway of development the kids are taking. We bring the parents' expectations into line as to what the expectations are from the coaching staff, and what the kids' expectations should be on themselves for the certain phases. As well as that, I use Coach Now to set up groups, or we use Messenger or chat, where we keep constant communication with the parents as well, just to let them know how trainings are going. So ultimately, it comes down to constant communication with the parents. But you're spot on. Like, it's probably one of the biggest hurdles that I think any academy is going to be faced with, is managing the expectations of both the parents and the players. And we can use stats to back up for them, as to show them how many players are going to end up being on the major tours. And that's why ultimately the program is built around developing the athlete and the player. And what we mean by that is developing the human skills, as well as the physical skills, as well as the golf skills. So when push comes to shove, whether they stay in the academy right through till they're a young adult, or whether they decide to go and do something else, whether it be through studies or other sports, they're hopefully going to leave our academy just better people, as well as just better golfers.
Yeah, that it's a key takeaway I've taken from this whole podcast, is that C word, that communication, making sure that everyone in front of you has that communication, those communication pathways open, and you're talking to them constantly, keeping them on top of what is expected and what is expected from them, and what they can expect from the actual training. So
that's right.
Advice for coaches out there: make sure you have got those communication pathways set up properly. And you can do it with systems these days online, and make sure that there's automatic emails going out, and apps like Coach Now certainly play a huge role in that.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's what coaching is. Coaching's just building great relationships and having open communication, and you nail those two things, and developing the golf skills is pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Now, again, doing some research for the podcast today, I was surprised to see that you do a whole lot of regional coaching. Now, I used to do that when I was in Albury. I grew up in the country, so I used to go out to all the little sand green courses around the area and offer my coaching services. Great way to build clients, and generally they're very hospitable when it comes to people coming out. So I used to enjoy doing that. Is that something you still do, or is that something you did early on just to build your clientele?
No, I do that through. I still to this day do it. So I do that's through Golf Australia. So through our Golf Australia, through the juniors, with the juniors, Golf Queensland head out to the regional towns, whether it be Cairns or Mackay, Townsville, to the mining towns. We head out for a couple of days with the junior development officer and see the juniors out there, and spend a couple of days with them, delivering basically everything we've spoken about on this podcast today. So, take some technology out there with them, which they often aren't exposed to, and identify if there's any, really talented young kids out in those areas. Identify that talent, and then we also some of them then get invited back for a camp in Queensland, closer to a couple of the big tournaments at the back end of the year. So ultimately, it's to service those regional towns with the juniors, but also to identify talent whereby we may not get to see it unless we actually head out there and see those kids.
I think that's a really cool program, and a shout out to Peter Knight, because of one of my early experiences as a junior golfer was having the New South Wales state team come down and play, and they played a sand green course and they played a grass green course in the Albury area, and that was cool to have exposure to those kind of players and those kind of coaches early on. So
Definitely.
I do recall them having to use the range balls on the sand green course because they only had wound balls in their golf bags. So that was certainly the experience, and they couldn't quite get used to the sand greens. It was quite funny to watch.
Would be a little bit of an adaptation, yeah.
So that was pretty cool. But I'm keen to have Peter on the podcast at some stage as well. So I'm sure I'll tell that story to him when we get him in for a chat. Thank you so much for your time today, Richard. It was really awesome of you to come in and chat with me. I just enjoy having high performance, high quality coaches and high quality people on the podcast. So I really do appreciate your time. But we do have a fast 4 questions to finish off the podcast. So I thought we'd go through those for you. There's heaps of advice through the whole podcast for coaches starting out. But do you have a specific piece of advice for young coaches starting out in the golf coaching field?
Seek knowledge. So basically, attend as many seminars as you possibly can. Go and watch coaches, go and observe coaching sessions, read a lot, listen a lot, and probably more so work on your own personal skills in terms of communication and build the ability to build relationships. I know when we were employing coaches down here, I was looking for a young new coach, and one of the biggest skills I just wanted was someone to have good communication skills. Actually, myself helping them out, learn some technical knowledge and so forth is, again, probably the easier job. We can do that. But if they can, as a young coach, if you can learn to communicate really well, present well, you'll go a long way.
Just quickly on that, do you find that some coaches can get results just through having the gift of the gab, so to speak? I don't know whether that will translate very well to overseas people listening, but being able to sell the ideas as opposed to having perfect golf swing understanding?
No. I think eventually you're going to get found out. If you don't have if you don't have the golf knowledge, then it doesn't matter what you say, you're going to get found out. You're going to get called out on it. So I think being able to have the gift of being able to talk well and present well is definitely important, but ultimately you have to couple that with your knowledge, or else it won't hold up.
Yeah, for sure. Any advice for golfers out there? Hopefully we've got a few golfers tuning into the podcast. So what's the advice for the average golfer out there? Go
and get a lesson from a PGA professional, basically, and stick to it. So basically, find someone that you can trust, find someone you can feel comfortable with. The PGA of Australia coaches are all so well trained. So if you're a new golfer and you're wanting to learn the game, make it easier on yourself and go and learn how to play the game properly by getting good advice from a PGA member. Yeah, I think that's great advice. And finding someone that you're comfortable with, that you can spend time with, is certainly great advice for the golfers out there. Yeah, 100%.
So, now, you spoke a lot about your coaching strategies and techniques evolving constantly. Yep. So where do you see yourself or coaching? You can answer either or both in 5 years' time.
My goodness, who knows? I wouldn't have said I would be here 5 years ago. If I said I was on this podcast or doing what I'm doing right now, I wouldn't have been able to pick it. So 5 years from now, I just hope that we have this academy in an incredibly good place in terms of whether it be through in the high performance space or just the general golfer coming through. I want to be doing more presenting at more seminars, my own personal development, have some players win some major tournaments would be also obviously really nice. But to be fair, I'll just continue learning and keep trying to do the best job I can do. And in 5 years, if that means those things come to fruition, then I'll be stoked.
I think that's great advice. If you see yourself continually evolving, continually changing, continue to make yourself improve, then that's going to only be good for your students as well. So yep. I certainly like that one. So this is always an interesting question, though. So obviously your pathway into golf coaching took a certain path. Mm-hmm. Would you change anything? If you had the chance to go back and change something? I know I would, if I, as a golf coach, is there anything that you would change in your pathway?
Don't know. I don't know if there's anything I'd change. I'd probably no. Look, I don't think there is anything I'd change. I've enjoyed the ride so far. I took a risk in coming over here. That was probably the biggest move I did, as you know, for leaving New Zealand. And pushing myself out of my comfort zone that way. I don't think there's anything I'd change. Ultimately, you'd always do some things a little bit differently, but I'm still pushing to do better. And no, I don't think there's anything I'd change.
No, that's completely a valid answer, and haven't got any problem with that whatsoever. So, where can people find you if they're after some coaching or are keen to check out your information?
Sure.
Let people know where they can find you.
Yep. So I'm located at KDV Sport Golf Academy here on the Gold Coast. So you can contact the academy directly, or you can get me probably on all the socials. The easiest one's probably through Instagram at Richard Woodhouse Golf. That's probably the easiest way to get me if you want to get on there, or Twitter's Woodhouse Golf, or the Facebook page Richard Woodhouse Golf.
There's certainly heaps of good content on the Instagram page, so encourage everyone to jump on the Instagram page if you get a chance.
Excellent.
And I will put some links in the description of this episode so we can point you in the right space to find Richard. But thank you so much for your time today, mate. I really appreciate it. You're a busy man, and with the time difference, it's quite early up there, I understand, on a Saturday morning. So I appreciate you taking time to come and have a chat to us.
Absolute pleasure, Brent. You're doing wonderful things with the podcast, and the more we can all share information, I think the better this game's going to be. So thank you very much.
Mate, I'm enjoying doing it. I get to talk to world-class coaches like yourself, so it's certainly a good thing. So thanks again for your time, and we'll catch up really, really soon.
All right. Have a great day, mate. Thank you.
Thanks, mate.